Hello, I'm Howard Dixon, Rock Island's European representative, and I'm joined here again by my good friend Connor Fitzgerald to introduce some highlights coming up for sale in the August premiere auction to be held at Bedford, Texas, from the Norman R. Blank collection.
And the first one we have here, Howard, is by Josef Perger of Graz, Austria, a Schützen rifle.
And a fine specimen it is too.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating about this rifle is that this gentleman, this gun maker, participated in the 1851 exhibition in London. And the gun, inlaid in gold, acknowledges that he won medals at both London and in Munich.
Indeed it does. And it sort of demonstrates some fantastic design flair. I mean, the standard shape of this mirrors the offhand shooting Schützen rifle with the deep hooked butt plate, the very pronounced cheek piece, the pistol grip trigger guard here. But it's the level of ornamentation on this rifle.
But isn't the trigger guard fascinating with the finger grooves? Very similar to wheel lock rifles from hundreds of years before.
Nothing is new.
Nothing is new.
Nothing is new.
And perhaps the most fascinating thing is this gargoyle shaped hammer, gold inlaid. Tell me about that now.
I mean, it's completely chiseled in the round, and the level of detail just on a simple thing like the percussion hammer on this rifle is fabulous. And here it is striking into this intricately detailed breech area with chiseled fences. And again, a very traditional form of rifle. There is a false breech on the opposite side, producing
particular to the time period and the region for that.
Absolutely, it produces a very symmetrical, aesthetically pleasing shape.
And you know what else is actually very interesting is that the eyes of the gargoyle and other creatures throughout the barrel and forend are inlaid with glass.
Absolutely, little cut glass eyes. I think a couple of them have some gold eyes, and
they do.
And then the mounts around here and things like the tang, that they're very, very finely etched with scroll work and these wonderful vignettes of classical goddesses. And I must admit, I'm particularly drawn to the one on the lock plate of Bacchus surrounded by bunches of grapes.
Beautiful work too.
Absolutely.
There are several. There's vignettes along the butt plate, tang, the underside. There's several goddesses and gods
absolutely
depicted upon this rifle. Each one has its name too.
Yep, they are all named beneath the image, and as the very detailed one on the side plate of Europa. I mean, it's fabulous work, absolutely fabulous.
But Schützen rifles, plain or ornamented, were immensely popular in the mid to late 19th century.
Absolutely. I mean, the skill of shooting competition and precision rifle shooting across Germany, Austria, Switzerland, even in parts of France. I mean, it remained an enormously popular sport, sort of at local village level up to national championship levels.
And what's further interesting is the fact that the Germans, immigrants to the United States, coming to places like Minnesota, brought this shooting sport with them.
Absolutely, and I think perhaps looking slightly with European eyes, when I look at some of the traditional American-made long rifles, can certainly see a similarity in form and shape between the rifles produced in America by the early gunsmiths over here and this style of precision rifle from Europe.
Yet this particular one is a tour de force of superb engraving and gun-making skill.
Absolutely. I mean, technically, it is absolutely at the top of its game, and decoratively, this was either intended for exhibition somewhere or for sale to an extremely well-heeled buyer. In a similar vein, we have this very fine birding rifle from Silesia, so that's out towards the east of modern Germany.
So the German lands.
German lands, certainly German influenced, and this is a couple of hundred years earlier than our percussion rifle here that we've just been discussing. But again, you can see certain stylistic similarities.
Absolutely.
The long, slender barrel, the small caliber, the finger groove trigger guard.
Absolutely.
Now, I know you've been studying this one a little bit, so sort of talk us through the
Take it away.
decorative
All right.
elements.
What is interesting about this rifle is that it does have similarities to the one from the 19th century, even though it is a couple of 100 years earlier. It does have the same finger groove trigger guard and other stylistic and physical features that are typical of the German type. But what's nice about this is the Fruitwood's full stock is inlaid profusely with staghorn, and these pieces are engraved and decorated with hunting scenes. Featured on the cheek piece is a dog and a stag surrounded by several minor hunting scenes throughout the entire gun. A boar and dogs, and elsewhere, hunters and so forth, but beautiful scroll inlays and dots decorating the entire piece. And this is basically a small
Birding
wheellock
rifle.
birding rifle from Silesia, a classic Schenk of the 1650s.
I mean, the skill on the inlay in the stock is just fabulous. I mean, the small sort of hunting scenes and the animals that are inlaid, I mean, as intricately as they're done, and the piercings and inletting around the legs, tails, whatever is fabulous. It's when you look at that scroll work and those dots and people sort of, craftsmen carving the wood and actually fitting a natural sort of product like staghorn into those tiny gaps and making such beautiful designs. It is a decorative tour de force.
And laying staghorn as thinly as what's virtually thread in
Absolutely.
scrolls.
Incredibly
Staghorn
difficult.
in the form of a scroll. That's incredibly tough work.
It is. Moving on to another wheel lock, and slightly more substantially built one this. And this one features a very unusual method of construction in that all the pins and screws holding the principal parts of the gun together are hidden. Not a single one exposed on the outside of the firearm. Amazing. A little bit of a theme, I think, with this table of firearms so far has been the decorative opulence and the skill
Yes.
of the craftsman. And this particular wheel lock rifle, the work on the lock plate especially, is just fabulous.
It is, absolutely. Stunning.
The principal scene, as you can see here on this large fence over the cock, is St. George and the Dragon. And the dragon is sort of busily being speared through the mouth by our noble knight. But we have this most wonderful carved scroll work throughout. The entire background is finely stippled. And the sliding pan cover here is this recumbent lion. And as you pointed out to me earlier this morning, there is this tiny little vent just showing by its neck, which is a technical safety feature,
Absolutely.
but just so beautifully hidden within that lion shape. It's absolutely fabulous.
And what's really astonishing about the scroll work is not so much that it's cut in, is that it's actually raised up.
Absolutely.
And so in order to achieve that, you actually have to take the main barrel metal down so that you have these pieces to then chisel in relief
Yeah.
and stipple the backgrounds.
It's absolutely astonishing level of
It
craftsmanship
is.
and work.
It really is.
I absolutely love this piece. So virtually every surface of this firearm has been treated with the same level of deeply carved, chiseled ornament, up to and including the muzzle and the muzzle face. The attention to detail is astonishing.
It is. And it's carved deeply. It's stippled.
Absolutely.
I've never seen that before.
Not like that, I haven't. No.
And yet, as fantastic the work, it's still quite austere. There are large areas that are left plain
Yep.
because you could do this on entirely every surface, and yet that would be too much. As fabulous as this work is, it's kept discreet and simple
Absolutely.
in precise locations.
tasteful.
Absolutely.
We can't finish with this rifle until we make mention of the trigger guard.
I know you have to mention.
We have to mention that. So on a wheel lock trigger guard, the back edge,
The rear
along
support.
here, is normally plain. On this one, there is the most wonderful rendition of a wild man. Fabulous.
A Bigfoot.
A Bigfoot indeed.
The next and most unusual gun, perhaps, on this table is a pinfire gun of the 1860s, 1870s period. This is a patent by Alphonse Caron, and it uses an interrupted screw breech with a turning barrel and a side hammer, much like sometimes you'd see on other percussion guns, but this is a pinfire. And should we open this gun, Howard? Do you want to?
I think we should.
Because this is quite ingenious.
We lift the lever up, mechanism is unlocked. We then rotate the barrel, pull clear of the interrupted thread. We have here the little catch for locating the pin of the pinfire cartridge. Once loaded, the barrel is pushed back onto the interrupted thread, rotated and locked in position. We then have this intricate side hammer with the pin of the pinfire cartridge protruding through the slot, detonated by the hammer falling on it.
Wonderfully complex, yet simple in form. Side hammer, barrel with interrupted screw breech, ebonite stock, Damascus barrel.
I mean, it is beautifully engineered and
Absolutely.
taking on board, I think, what were early worries about the newfangled pinfire cartridge system, with the early break-open guns not being particularly strong. The actions aren't. Whereas this single barrel, utilizing, as you said, that interrupted screw thread, that is such a solid, simple, well-engineered weapon.
Absolutely ingenious.
I mean, operation simple. You lift that lever, quarter turn, pull the barrel forward. What could be simpler, and yet what could be stronger? Fantastic.
And gorgeously decorated with scrollwork.
Absolutely. One has to remember, when pinfires were new firearms, this was the new technology.
Yes.
And again, these were, generally speaking, at this level, not mass produced. These were expensive weapons.
Yes,
Fabulous thing.
indeed.
In front of us, we have a selection of British sporting guns and rifles from the percussion era from the Norman R. Blank collection. And to start us off, who doesn't like a 4-bore percussion rifle? And this particular example here, by John Dixon and Sons of Edinburgh. It's stupendously rare. Dixon's did not make many of these very large bore rifles. And we know from the factory records that this one was sold in the summer of 1859. And I think it's probably fairly safe to assume was destined for India.
Certainly. Definitely.
Slightly modified from factory standard, with the addition of these, a little silver reinforcing plate down the edge of each side of the forearm, which unusual feature. They certainly look like they've been on there not long after this rifle was
I
built.
would agree.
The bullet that it takes is almost four-winged. It looks like, from the shape of the rifling, there's some sort of very pronounced deep grooves.
4-groove gun.
Four-groove
Rifle.
gun, yeah.
200-yard folding rear side, Howard?
A very ambitious
That would be
200-yard
very
folding rear
ambitious.
sight. Yeah. But yes, this is the ultimate dangerous game rifle for the early Victorian hunter.
And you would hunt tigers with this rifle.
Yes.
This is a massive, massive rifle.
Substantial, sir.
Okay, substantial. Indeed, absolutely. And the next gun that we have is a shotgun by Benjamin Sturman. This fabulous gun, the condition of which is quite remarkable, is beautifully gold inlaid along the rib, with a game scene of 2 dogs and 2 birds. Quite a rare and fantastically executed achievement. It also, in gold, has the owner's name
Very
on the
unusual.
standing breech. That's quite
Very unusual feature.
It's not done afterwards. It's done when the gun was made.
Absolutely. And another feature I love about this gun is the Damascus pattern.
Damascus is really quite extraordinary.
They've managed to get these sort of almost chevron shapes of different patterns of Damascus, and they are mirrored perfectly in each barrel,
Absolutely.
muzzle to breech.
Alternating all the way up in a mirrored pattern. That's really quite true.
It's a fabulous piece of work.
But another unusual feature is the pistol grip.
Yes, that is
Mounted with a silver pistol grip cap, game scene engraved, but of unusual form.
It's a very unusual form, and again, from this period, you just don't really expect to find a shotgun with any semblance of a cheek piece, and certainly a pistol grip like that. Very, very unusual.
So when one looks at a gun like this, you definitely see high quality.
Very high
Massive
quality. Yeah, it's absolute. The barrel forging work on this alone, let alone the engraving and the beautiful piece of wood used for the stock, just the barrel forging alone on this gun it's a masterpiece. Absolute masterpiece.
And yet, the next gun by John Manton and Son is another masterpiece. Tell us about this gun.
Well, it's a late period for John Manton and Son, so we're into the early 1840s. It's a single barrel duck gun, a wild fowling gun. Have these, again, the typical small little game scenes involving duck. In this case, it's duck. In sort of other cases, it would be partridge, pheasant. But what I find absolutely amazing about this gun is the engraving has a signature, and you never find guns of this period with an engraver's signature.
So in fact, the tiny signature is the massive importance of this gun. That's significant.
It is.
Truly significant. The engraver, John W. Shorman of Soho, was quite noted. He was at the London exhibition of 1851. He, is listed in the books and, is quite well known.
Well, he was known as a gun engraver.
But this is the first time we've known him to have signed a work.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for about 30 years, same as you, and I cannot remember ever seeing a gun of this period signed.
It's classic today to have an engraver sign a gun.
Absolutely.
As they should. It's a great thing to do. Then they did not do that. Yet here it is. What do you make of that?
I honestly do not know. It could be a variety of reasons. Maybe it was because this gun was due to be exhibited somewhere or shown to someone particularly important, and Mr. Shorman was particularly proud of his engraving work with John Manton and Son, and thought he'd sort of showcase his work.
And John Manton and Son were also at the 1851 exhibit.
They were indeed. They were indeed. Which brings us neatly on to our last percussion gun at the front.
An incredible gun by J.W. Edge. This unusual and highly finished gun is one of the highlights of the group, isn't it?
It is. I mean, Edge he was a Manchester maker, so Midlands maker. Close to Birmingham, but not a Birmingham maker. And there are certain makers that you come across over the years when you handle enough of these guns, where the turn of phrase can be, I've never seen a bad gun by Edge. They've always been finished to a remarkably high standard, whether it be a rifle or a shotgun. You see them that have lost their condition, but you never see a gun that was poorly manufactured by him.
And here is one that retains its superb condition.
Absolutely. From the original Browning, original case colours, crisp engraving, fabulous piece of wood on the stock, and these wonderful little design flares. I mean, it has the floating island locks, a very, very elegant design feature. And as we noticed earlier today, on the inside edge of the percussion hammers, there's a little reinforced bar.
Yes.
The weak spot on a percussion hammer is the neck of it. So he's reinforced his from factory.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
So when I saw this gun really stood out. This gun was a beautiful example of British percussion shotguns of that period.
You'd be hard pushed.
Outstanding.
You'd be hard pushed to find a better one.
Agreed.
We're going to start this final segment of this video on the Norman R. Blank collection, and I'm going to indulge myself with a short piece of poetry written in 1783. In fact, it's the opening lines to a stanza written on dueling. Hail Wogden, patron of the leaden death, which neatly leads me on to the pair of dueling pistols directly in front of me by the very famous British gunmaker Robert Wogden. Now, last time for the May auction, we discussed Manton dueling pistols. Perhaps as famous, if not more famous, than the Manton brothers and their dueling pistols was Wogden. He came up with some ingenious technical ideas on the practice of dueling, including having the bore of some of his pistols, not all, some, not completely true to the axis of the barrel. They actually shoot slightly downwards. Because he worked out that when people were faced in a dueling situation, they continued to raise their arm as they fired and were missing high. So he compensated for this with making his pistols shoot deliberately low.
And these pistols date from when, Howard?
We're going to call these 1785, early 1780s, 1785.
So this period of time was one of the great periods of dueling in Europe, let alone, of course, in England.
Absolutely. It was the de rigueur way of settling affairs of honour.
Between gentlemen.
Between gentlemen. I mean, the practice of dueling became almost out of hand to the point that by the early 19th century, during the Peninsular War, Wellington issued orders that any officers caught planning to fight a duel would be sent home in disgrace, because he was losing so many officers wounded and killed in duels. In fact, I do believe it was a pair of Wogden dueling pistols that were used in the famous Burr-Hamilton duel in America.
That would have been Wogden and Barton, and you're quite right. Absolutely true.
Yeah, his later partnership. But these pistols are not just dueling pistols, they're not just killing machines. These have got a great deal of decorative appeal. These have full silver mounts, including these very characteristic large butt plates of the figure of Britannia, which was very much a Wogden thing. Silver side plates, silver trigger guards, this lovely characteristic beadwork engraved around the breech end. A very, very delicate, balanced pair of pistols. This is a sort of case of form over function. No, these were made to do a job.
Absolutely. And from the period of flintlocks, we come to a rare pair of Reverend Alexander Forsyth's second type, sliding
Magazine primed?
magazine primed pistols, dating from about 1810.
Maybe, 1810, 1815.
Okay. And these are officers' pistols. So these aren't technically dueling pistols.
No.
These would be officers' pistols with the swivel ramrods and very large bores.
Absolutely. And They're quite substantially stocked, which to me indicates that they're meant to sort of withstand the rigors of campaign life.
Yes.
But this, Forsyth and his systems, I mean, in the sort of evolution of firearms development, he has to take a lot of credit.
Indeed, absolutely true.
So 200-300 years of relying on open pans of gunpowder being ignited by a shower of sparks from a stone. And here we go to fulminate mercury compound.
In fact, you kind of see the development of later firearms into the late 19th century, early 20th century from this sliding magazine operated by the hammer. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is. You can almost sort of see the nucleus of the idea of semi-automatic firearms.
You can. Yeah, absolutely. And yet Forsyth had a hard time keeping control of the patent.
He did indeed.
And it was popular to copy his patent, not only in England, but also on the continent.
And pretty quickly it was superseded by what became and developed into the classic percussion cap.
But he has to be given some credit for that too.
Absolutely. Without his groundbreaking work, it broke the stranglehold or development stop on the firearm. The firearm had not developed essentially into 250 years until the Reverend.
I told the good Reverend, these are quite rare.
They are very rare. He did not make that many of his magazine-type pistols, these repeated, self-priming pistols. And yeah, so to have a serial numbered pair, they're logged in the book on Forsyth by W. Keith Neal and DHL Back. And yeah, these are a rare surviving pair.
Not commonly seen at all.
Nope.
No. Norman R. Blank of Pasadena, California was a consummate collector. He collected beginning in the 1950s and continued until his passing in 2004. The collection hasn't been seen since then, and this is a rare opportunity to see some of the finest guns and some of the most interesting and fascinating collector pieces in the firearms community.
These firearms from the Norman R. Blank collection will form part of our August auction to be held in Bedford, Texas, and we look forward to welcoming you there.